What an absolute treat. Favorite part of the Combine, the yearly interview with Greg Cosell from NFL
You
Films.
must have had a slow day.
No, well, listen, I'm still riding high after yesterday where I got to hang out with you and Charles Davis.
That
and
was
just
fun.
Listen.
That was a great conversation.
It was awesome.
That was a great conversation.
I said after that, I think I should leave. I don't think the Combine's going to get any better for me.
That was awesome.
It was fun. Well, this is going to be awesome, too, and it is great to see you again. When you come here, and I know that those are the interactions certainly that I love to have, what do you like the most about being here?
Just to see you. That's it. After that, I could leave after this, and I'm good to go.
Me too.
Yeah.
It works out. It's a mutual admiration society.
Well, it's funny. I mean, all kidding aside, the conversation you mentioned yesterday, those are the things I love about the Combine. You get to have these impromptu conversations. I get to go out for breakfast or lunch with scouts, coaches. This is what I really love because, I just love talking ball, and I love learning. I love hearing things that resonate. I watch a ton of tape, and obviously I've been doing it for years and years. But then you hear, whether it's, Charles Davis or a scout or a coach say something in a way that just resonates differently, even though you know what they're saying, and you go, oh, yeah, but it just hits you in a different way. And you'll learn something. And then when I go back and watch tape, I feel like my mind has expanded a little bit. And, I've always been intellectually curious. I love to read books. So that to me is the joy of the Combine. And everybody's relaxed because no coach has a game Sunday. No one is uptight, So you just have, I had an impromptu conversation with a defensive coordinator. I had lunch with a really good friend of mine today who's a scout. And then we're walking back and we see a D coordinator that he knew and introduced me. And we ended up talking for 25 minutes just about conceptual football. That's the kind of stuff. You can't put a price tag on that.
I agree. I think that is the best part of it. You call it talking ball. I like to listen ball.
Right,
so I
right.
like to listen to
well,
ball
I'm
when
listening
you guys are
mostly
talking.
too. Because that's the way I learn. You listen.
No,
but
course.
Having those conversations, to me, they're the best.
And I've learned, and I'm saying this is not kidding. I've learned more from you and just over the years just trying to glean information about how to understand football. When you said earlier, I watch a lot of tape, I would like the people who are listening and watch this program to understand what that really means. Will you let them know? Take them through a film week in the life of Greg Cosell.
Well, basically, obviously the NFL season, I'm basically grinding tape all day Monday, all day Tuesday. Obviously, I have to do work for my NFL matchup show, which, I created in the 80s, produced for years, and now have been on it as an analyst for 7 or 8 years.
Good.
But then once that work is done, and we normally shoot that show on a Friday. But then when that work's done, I just go back to watching as much tape as I can throughout the course of a week. I can't get through every game, particularly when there's 16 games, but I get through as much as I possibly can. I probably take 35 typewritten pages of notes every week.
On the National Football League?
Yes.
And when you're doing that, are you looking more for league concepts, league trends, schematic football, or is it or players?
It's a combination of both. I would say I've evolved when it comes to the NFL, mostly in terms of tactics and schematics.
Okay.
Like if I get a call from a writer saying, "Hey, I'm doing my All-Pro team. Who are the best left guards in the league?" I'm probably not going to be able to answer that in a great way. I'm not studying it like that. Obviously, if I'm looking at a team and they have a high draft choice at a certain position, maybe I'm taking a little more of a more detailed look at that guy just because of who he is.
Sure.
But I can't study in detail, 5 offensive linemen.
Right. Of course.
I can't. But so I do that every single week. I work on weekends. I probably work 70, 75 hours a week. And then mid-January, once there's fewer NFL games, that's when I really start hitting the college players. That has a different intellectual feel to it because even though you have to have some sense of schematics, then I'm a little more focused on individuals and what their traits, attributes, characteristics are. But you still have to think about it in terms of their projection and transition to the league. You're not evaluating college players in a vacuum. You have to think about, okay, and since I don't work for a team, I don't have a mandate from, let's say, a scouting director saying, hey, here's the kind of player we want.
Right.
So I have to think in terms of, okay, I'm watching a defensive tackle. What kind of player is he? Is he a power player? Is he a quickness player? What teams, rely more on, they want their players, with what they do with their fronts to be power players. What teams, look maybe more for quickness.
Sure.
I try to think like that.
Yep.
So that changes sort of my intellectual approach and academic approach, and I really like that.
How much in the NFL portion of it, you're talking schematics, and I could be like, oh, look at how this team plays its quarters coverages.
Right,
oh, that's
right.
neat, and things like that. How much are you also kind of saying to kind of keep your learning going? You said you're intellectually curious, but, this last year coming out of college, I thought this guy was this.
Right.
Now I'm actually seeing it here, so I could go back to my notes and be like, this is where I got this right, or maybe I'm really good at kind of identifying this, and here's where.
I find that I get guys wrong for two reasons. One, I'm just wrong. I didn't evaluate him, and I just made a misevaluation.
Sure.
Other times it can be wrong because I see a guy in my mind to be deployed in the NFL a certain way, and for whatever reason, whatever team he goes to, they don't deploy him in that way. And I think to myself, and again, no knock on coach. I mean, it's still human beings evaluating human beings, and in my mind, I think, God, I really thought that this guy could do this better and would fit better being used in that role, and that's not the way he's being deployed.
Right.
So, again, it doesn't make me smarter than coaches. I never ever rip coaches. I never ever am critical of coaches. Like, I get asked a lot, what do you think of the game plan? What do you think of the play calling? I don't answer those questions because I always say, you know what? You'd have to be there from Monday morning until Saturday night and know what the whole process is to even be able to make a comment about it, much less really say something meaningful about it.
Well, people believe they can make comments about anything.
Well, we know that.
Make an intelligent
right. We know that.
Yes.
I mean, you're in a situation where you probably get a chance to talk to the coaches because you're doing the games. So, and again, you're not getting every morsel of information, but you're being given enough so that you can speak intelligently when you're doing the games.
Understand what we're trying to attack and accomplish in the
Correct,
game.
correct. Right. But it's like when people ask me about a guy's character or leadership, I say I can't answer that. You have to be there every day to know that.
Yep.
I can't answer that.
Yeah.
You got to be there every day.
Yeah.
I can't answer that from seeing a guy give an interview, a post-game interview or a Wednesday interview. I don't know that.
For sure. No.
Yeah.
No, that's one of those things. Right. And those are traits that's why they have these area scouts, and that's why you hopefully have familiarity and you can kind of flesh some of those things out. Let's talk quarterbacks for a second.
Sure.
I love hearing the way that you approach this position. One thing I wanted to ask you is I'll never forget talking to you about Patrick Mahomes of the 2017 draft. And you were what I think is
seems like that was about, eons ago.
It seems like it was decades ago.
Yeah.
But I remember you saying that you found him. You don't say, oh, I think this guy's going to be great, or he's not. You watch the tape and you say, here are basically my findings. And I remember you saying at the time that Patrick Mahomes was, for you, kind of the hardest projection because we hadn't seen anybody play the game the way that he played the game.
Quite like that, correct.
When you think about that frame of mind now, how you've seen him actually play the game now, and I would say a variety of quarterbacks play a similar style game, how has your evaluation of that position changed? And I'm leading to, in 2017, I feel like you probably would have thought Cam Ward was maybe a tougher evaluation for you than he is today.
Yeah. And I think that's a great question, Nathan, because you have to evolve with the game. And I like to think I do that. I mean, I could be totally honest that 15 or 20 years ago, I was probably still caught up in 6'4", 225 pocket quarterback, and that's what you had to be. And then you see how the game changes. And it changes and evolves for many reasons. Because don't forget, defenses change, and the quarterback position and offenses have to evolve as well. Sometimes offense fuels changes in defense. Sometimes defense fuels changes in offense. None of this is 100%. A lot of fans think this stuff's 100%. You made one thing you don't like about a guy. Oh, you hate him.
It's nuance.
That's never the way it is.
Yes.
So what we've seen over time in the NFL is defenses have become so much more skillful at pressuring the quarterback. More and more teams use second and third level players, particularly third level players, of which Steve Spagnuolo is a master, Todd Bowles is a master, as blitzers. So you end up with more speed rushing the quarterback. You end up with players coming from distance that offensive linemen don't necessarily see in their vision. So, the game has become faster on defense. So now there are more plays where the quarterback is under more duress. A lot of people would still argue that the biggest mismatch in the NFL is still pass rushers versus O-linemen. As good as O-linemen have gotten in terms of better athleticism than 15 or 20 or 25 years ago, we see that, when you're facing a Myles Garrett or just the great athletes as pass rushers, those guys are just better athletes than the offensive linemen.
Yep.
It's just the way it is.
Yep.
So now quarterbacks, yes, do we still believe that quarterbacks have to have some level of efficiency throwing from the pocket? Of course they do, because that's how the game is taught. They've got to be able to drop back, execute the way the offense is taught. But now the game is such that there are many more plays than ever before where the defense wins the early part of the down. And the quarterback has to have some kind of reactive mechanism, whether it's pocket movement, where he doesn't necessarily leave the pocket, but he's able to avoid, reset, and still deliver the ball, whether it's the ability to get outside the pocket and make a play. So now the trait that when you mentioned 2017 in Mahomes, and now we look at a Cam Ward, you think, okay, that has become a little more of an essential trait. If you can't do that, you have to be so good pre-snap and post-snap that you have to be just really good. And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's really, particularly since younger quarterbacks don't grow up being taught the position that way anymore. Everything is pure progression. They're not really taught defense. All they're taught is, here's your primary, here's your secondary, here's your third. If you drop back and your primary's not open, hey, it doesn't matter why he's not open. Just look to the next guy. So they really don't know about defense.
Right.
All they know are the basics, like, is it single high or two shell? Might I get a blitz? Oh, I don't know. The center's going to figure that out. That's the way these guys are taught right now, to be totally honest. So, it's becoming harder and harder to just be a pure pocket player with no other real meaningful ability. You have to be so good at a really high level.
And you have to be so cerebral to do that.
You have to be able to win a lot of plays before the ball's even snapped.
Exactly. And then you think about the greats, Peyton and Brady and Drew Brees, that's what they did. And then I think those guys, as young players in today's game, not Peyton obviously because of his pedigree, but it would be different, and you wonder what that would look like. And so I think
I've heard Brady talk. They beat the Chiefs, obviously, in the Super Bowl with the Bucs, which was not that long ago.
Yeah.
Okay? I think it was 31-9. They killed him. And Brady, and I don't, he wasn't bragging. He was just saying, and we all know how difficult the Steve Spagnuolo defense is to play against. And he said, going into that game, I knew more about Spagnuolo's defense than he did. He said, I won the plays before the ball was snapped. Now, you know how hard that is to do?
Yeah.
Now, Brady's Brady, arguably the greatest of all time. But still, we're talking about the concept of playing that way.
Totally.
That's hard to do.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be just purely a pocket quarterback, which Brady was, then you really have to going to be good at that. That's where you have to get to. You don't expect a guy coming in as a rookie to be that, but that's kind of where you have to get to. I think C.J. Stroud, who does have a little bit mobility, but he's essentially a pocket quarterback, I think he kind of learned this year. This was a little bit of a learning year. The O-line wasn't quite as good. He started to play a little faster at times. He missed some throws that he normally
his accuracy,
makes.
Absolutely.
And I think he probably learned this year that, what? Now my next step in and you hope the coaches work with him on this, is I'm going to have to get the best I can be pre-snap, and I'm going to have to be better in squeezed pockets, because when you're a pocket quarterback, in the NFL there's going to be bodies around you, and you still have to execute. It's not an excuse that, my O-line isn't as good as it was. You still got to play.
Yeah.
You still got to play.
And play well.
Right.
Yeah, that's the job.
That's the job.
That's why they get the big bucks.
No one cares that your O-line may not have been as good as it was.
And nobody talks because the Eagles won in the manner in which they did, and I think people do lose sight of the fact that, yes, they have a tremendous offensive line, and they've done an incredible job replenishing that. Jalen Hurts, I think, is a uniquely great quarterback, and he's surrounded by Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley,
Dallas Goedert. And the best, clearly the best run-blocking O-line and a really good pass-protecting O-line.
Right. But they still have elite skill.
Correct.
And he is uniquely able
And by
to
the
do
way,
things.
they won in a way, and this is a great conversation too, they won in a way that we've certainly been led to believe in recent years you can't win in the NFL, because there were plenty of games this year where Jalen threw for 130 yards, and they won. Now, his magic sauce is he's phenomenal as a scrambler, and there were many, many plays this year that were 3rd and 7, and he runs for a first down, and that's a very meaningful part of his game, and he's terrific at it. But there were plenty of games where he threw 22 balls and threw for 130 yards, and it's not a large enough sample size to say the NFL game is changing. But this year there were 6 backs that had over 300 carries. In 2023, there were no backs that had over 300 carries. So again, we're not going to sit here and say the whole NFL game is changing, but it's just an interesting kind of fact that more teams ran the ball with greater volume.
Well, and it was also a response to the fact that, according to a great many people, that 2 high shells were invented in the year 2024. We had never seen those.
Right, and of course they weren't invented, but
more
and more teams were playing with that umbrella look. Yes, yes.
Right, we're not going to give up the chunks, and
right.
Teams that could run block and have explosive running backs could get chunks on the ground, and the Eagles
which
did
is
that.
a great example of the evolution of football. I mean, with the Legion of Boom, everybody wanted to play cover 3.
Yep.
And then what happened was offenses clearly figured out how you can beat cover 3 because there's major voids in it. And then all of a sudden teams felt like, well, we can't really play cover 3 as our foundation because, teams are beating it. So now to take away the seams, teams said, you know what, we're not going to play cover 3.
Yep.
We're going to play with a 2 high safety structure because the seams aren't there.
Right, and we're not going to give up those chunks down the field.
No, exactly.
Make you matriculate the ball.
And that's why none of this is it's not a mathematical equation, and people view it as such. This is not black and white. It's not like there's one way to,
Yeah.
This is, this because of what you do. You're around coaches, you hear the way they talk. None of this is we have the answers to everything. I was talking to a DC today, great conversation for 30 minutes, and he was talking about all his own concepts, and he said, hey, in all our zone concepts, we know where the stress points are. We have to let the players know where the stress points are. Because in zone, there's always going to be stress points. And he says sometimes the offense finds the stress points and they get a successful play, and you know what? You move on to the next play. It happens.
Everybody's good.
Right.
Their whole goal is to find those stress points and attack them.
Right.
And your whole goal is to try to minimize them and stop that.
Right. I mean, think of it this way. When you play zone, what you're trying to do in your zone concepts is compress space. For an offense, and Ben Johnson is a master at this, and he's not the only one, but he just came to mind, what they're trying to do is increase the space. And so now you have the defense trying to compress it and the offense trying to expand it. And, sometimes the offense wins, sometimes the defense wins.
That's why it's a great chess match.
Yeah,
That's why it is the most fun that you can have, right? I know you like Cam Ward a lot.
I do.
So let's talk about him for a second here because you and I could go on tangents.
Well, I love these,
It's fun.
The main point is I hope people understand that none of this is a math. It's not like saying 2 and 2 is 4. It's not, it's not a mathematical equation.
No, and whatever 2 and 2 today is in 4 years could be a completely different answer.
Right.
You might not even be able to do addition anymore. Now you got to be multiplying.
Yeah. That's another question.
It all changes. Let's talk about Cam and the things that you like. When you put the tape on with him, obviously the arm talent jumps off at you. Part of the evolution I think that you would say is I know that there was a time when quarterback evaluators were so stuck on somebody's footwork because the feet had to marry to the concepts to deliver the football.
Right.
That's kind of
It still does. I mean, you can't say it doesn't. Because it's taught that way.
Of course.
Right.
But you can be somewhat.
Right.
People throw at different bases now than.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of customary.
And just so people understand, last summer I watched 7 games of Ward at Washington State from 2023. And in the last month I've watched probably 7 or 8 games from the U. So I've seen a lot of Cam Ward. To me, he's a high-level traits guy. He's got a live arm. The ball comes out of his hand. He can drive the ball with power. He can sit on his back foot and drive the ball. I thought he was efficient from the pocket. Does he need to clean up some footwork? Absolutely. He made some phenomenal throws outside of structure on the move. We've all seen those highlights, but there's plenty of other plays. While you wouldn't call him a creator, he certainly can run for a first down. So I guess... And I'm not looking, everybody said to me, where would he fit if he was in last year's draft? That's not relevant to me. He's in this year's draft.
I totally agree with
It's
that.
not relevant.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why he's not being talked about more as a really meaningful, potential high pick. I mean, the way people now talk, and I'm talking about coaches, talk about the quarterback position in the NFL, it seems to me he fits that mold. And I'm not going to sit here and compare him to Patrick Mahomes, but, stylistically, it's somewhat similar in that he can function from the pocket. He can make throw. Now, he's not, I wouldn't say he's as spatially aware as Mahomes or as special as Mahomes. We're not going to go there, and I don't want people to think that's what I mean.
Right.
But just stylistically, there's a similarity.
Yeah. One of the first things I wrote down when I was doing Cam was he must have been a fan of Mahomes, because you can see some of the things he does, some of, not the mannerisms, but the way he throws the football at times, and even Lamar where he's kind of flat-footed and he'll just fling it out there, that those things jump out at you. But his ability to really throw the football anywhere on the field with pace is kind of stunning to watch.
Yeah, no, I think he's a high-level traits guy. And I happen to know some people at Washington State, and they told me he's highly accountable, that he has an alpha dog personality, so that just made me feel even better. Normally, I don't get to find out that kind of stuff. I'm just sitting in my office at Films watching tape, but I just happen to know some people out there, so I don't understand why he's just not being talked about that way.
In your mind, that he's clear-cut. That's
in my mind.
If you're the Cleveland Browns, you want to come out of this draft with Cam Ward.
Yeah, and I can understand why, there's other points of view. I don't, you know me well enough to know I'm not one of those guys like, I'm right and you're wrong.
Sure.
There's so many variables. But to my mind, he's number one.
Do you think if we were looking at Shedeur, and maybe this is a something, just kind of, when I think of Shedur's best traits, to me, it is accuracy, decision-making, from the pocket. I think he's very tough. He will take hits and deliver the football. I think his arm is adequate. I don't think it's not Cam Ward's arm, but it's certainly good enough at the National Football League level. And maybe 10 years ago, we would have these guys flipped because of his pocket winning is at its best. If he maximizes everything, the way that he would play the game is similar to the way that a Brady or a Breeze would play the game. I'm not saying he's those guys, but that's how he has to win.
But that's how he has to play in the league.
Correct. Right. What you're saying, and that is tougher now than it has been at any point in league history.
Correct. So when we spoke, 10 minutes ago about playing from the pocket and being pristine in pre-snap, post-snap, he has to be that guy. At his core, he's a ball distributor and an efficient executor.
Yep.
That's what he is. To use the basketball term, he's a point guard.
Yep.
Okay, that's what he has to be. I'm not saying he can't be that. I think that's harder to do right now. And I think there's a number of things he would have to clean up in order to do that. He has a glaring tendency to hold the ball with one hand. That has to be cleaned up.
Got to have two hands on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Second thing he has a tendency to do is he retreats backwards. You can't retreat backwards in the NFL. The only guy who can do that is Lamar Jackson, and he's a freak.
And Mahomes a little bit.
Yeah. Well, Mahomes has spatial awareness that's just ridiculous. That you can't teach that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think there's some things that Shedeur clearly has to clean up. But he throws a good ball. I think he sees it well. He actually does throw well on the run. But he's not a playmaker, but he does throw the ball well on the run. Can he run for a first down? Yeah, but that's not his game.
Right.
So he has to be at the highest level of efficiency playing from the pocket.
And I think that would be something that you need to understand about him is his schematic understanding. One of the things that in my notes, I'm curious to see if you thought this as well with him, I felt like he did a very good job of understanding what a defense was doing, because there are lots of times where he would throw the ball and I'm watching it and I like to pause it and I'm like, okay, where's the ball going to go?
Right.
And the ball's actually coming out of his hand and I'm like, I have no idea where this ball's going. And instead he knows where nobody's going to be and gets it to a receiver wide open.
I mean, there's no question he has really positive traits as a pocket quarterback.
Yeah.
And you know how it is. People then think, Cosell hates Shedeur. No, I don't.
No, I know you don't.
And I think he could be a good quarterback. I just think that's harder to play that way. And particularly to start his career, he would need to be on a team with a good O-line, with a viable run game. Doesn't have to be an Eagles run game, or a Titans run game. A Ravens run game. but he would need a viable run game. He needed defense that, for the most part, keeps the game relatively close, because you don't want him to be in a situation where he's got to put up 30 every week just to compete.
Right.
Yeah, so I think he can be a good player. I don't think his overall traits level is what Cam Ward's is.
I think and we agree on that completely. Right. Do you think for a Kai with those kind of traits, there's a couple kinds of offenses in the NFL now, and you go through these schemes, and I'm oversimplifying it greatly, but there is we'll call it Shanahan, McVay,
right.
O'Connell, some Ben Johnson, Stefanski,
right,
where they ask very particular things of their quarterbacks, and then there's kind of the others where the quarterback kind of is the offense, which is Josh Allen. Now, I do schematic.
Right,
I know that
obviously there's still schemes, yes. I know what you're saying,
but
yes.
Some of them are more, okay, we're setting this up so that you're reading this, and if you read this correctly, you know that the ball goes here. If you see that, the ball goes there.
Right.
And can you execute that? Can you be an executor? So in your mind, is Shedeur, if the Browns say were to get Shedeur, is that we at least have the kind of system in place that you think he would be in the best position to succeed in?
I think he could succeed in a Stefanski offense. The run game, obviously, the whole Chubb issue. I guess he's a free agent too, so who knows what their run game's going to look like.
Sure.
But he needs a run game. The O-line, I don't know about all the players that are there, whether it's free agents.
Hopefully Joel comes back. It should be at least plus. It's a plus offensive line.
Right. So, he would need that. I think he can execute a Stefanski offense without question. I think there's plenty of offenses he can execute well. The question is how quickly he can become that guy that can basically dominate pre-snap. Think of Joe Burrow, okay? And this is not a one-to-one comparison. I hope
no, but I've heard multiple people say something like that.
Yeah. Joe Burrow is a computer chip when it comes to pre-snap and post-snap.
Elite.
Yeah. Shadir's going to have to move in that direction.
Yep.
And he may be more than capable of it.
Yep.
Again, he maybe in 2 years that's what we were talking about him.
Right.
It's very possible. I'm not saying that can't be the case.
Yeah. You're saying, but that's what
that's
maximize
what he's gonna
his
have to
talents.
Be.
That's what he's got to be.
Yes.
Whereas Cam has the ability to kind of make something out of nothing more often.
I mean, when you look at the Mahomes and the Josh Allens, they're going to miss some throws within structure. But my guess is the coaching staff doesn't say, "Oh man, you got to throw those balls or else," because they don't want to take away their ability to do that special stuff.
Yep.
You're not going to say to Josh Allen, who, makes ridiculous plays, particularly running to his right, that, oh, you know what, you kind of missed Shakir there, on that throw. You should have thrown it. You don't want to say that to Josh because you don't want him to start thinking, well, gee, do they want me not to move? Or, you don't want to do that.
Let him play.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it does feel like at times in the league, the teams that are better on offense are more explosive, and that can come in a variety of ways. But it's hard to run 13 plays against these defenses and score at the end of it. You need kind of that chunk. And then my notes on chunk play machine. I just kept writing that up, Cam Ward.
Right.
So that's something you look for.
Right.
And that's why I think in your evolution of what you do, that's why he jumps out so much.
Right. And again, just to reiterate, it doesn't mean that Shadir Sanders can't become a good player.
No, and he made plenty of chunks, but it's a different.
Right.
There is a difference.
They're different players who ultimately will need to succeed differently.
Right. I'd even take it back to you mentioned kind of the Stroud and the Bryce Young draft. Those two are actually in some ways I think more similar in terms of how they're going to ultimately have to win in the league. They're going to have to win mentally.
I mean, you can argue. It's funny you mentioned Stroud. You can argue that coming into the draft, okay? We know what Stroud's done. He's been very good for the most part. But you could argue that Shadir Sanders is a lesser Stroud because he's smaller and he doesn't throw it as well. So, I mean, again, Stroud was a second pick in the draft, had a phenomenal rookie season, was up and down in his second year, but they still made it to the second round of the playoffs.
He's won a playoff game and won a division 2 years in a row.
I know, so you can't sit here and say, well, gee, Stroud's no good. So Shadir is in terms of pure talent, he's a lowercase Stroud.
Which would be
and that's
music
okay.
to our
and
absolutely.
That's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it comes to what you do to maximize those things.
Right.
What is, and we'll get you out of here because this is so fun.
No,
We
this
can
is
talk about
great.
a million
I could
things.
talk to you all day.
What is, in your mind, coming off of what we saw and knowing how you like to dive into the schemes, what do you think? Because this is it's in some sense a copycat league. Some things can't be copycatted, and I think the way the Eagles do it really can't be because they start at 1st and 9, and nobody else in the league has figured out how to start every drive at 1st and 9.
Right.
What do you think will be kind of our defenses with the run game? Are they going to be like, okay, maybe we have to do a little more single high? Or do you think we're going to be in a phase for a while where they're saying our goal is to make teams do what we just said is hard, go on 12, 13 play drives?
Well, I'm going to answer that this way, and I think this wasn't talked about enough. And I remember at the Super Bowl, doing shows and talking about this a lot. I'm going to be very curious to see, because the Eagles are a 4-down offense.
100%.
And I'm curious to see if more teams are going to start doing that. Because if the Eagles have 4th, and none of this is 100%, but if the Eagles have 4th and 4 or less from the -40 going forward,
they're going.
They pretty much are going for it.
Yep.
And that changes the way you have to play defense against them. So I'm very curious to see if more teams are going to, and maybe that's a function of analytics, metrics, whatever you want to call it,
and they're really good at it.
They're really good at it.
Yeah. Well, it changes, and to your point, 3rd and 9 against most teams is just stop them short, and we get the ball back.
I mean, how many times do you see in the NFL, 3rd and 9, team gains 7, it's 4th and 2, and the defense gets so excited, everybody puts their hands up, it's 4th down? Well, the Eagles are going to go for that.
Eagles, Lions.
Yeah.
And by the way, both pretty successful teams, but that's my point.
Yeah.
In the old days, you would say, let them check it down.
Right.
They can pick up 7
well, that's
and we'll
the other
tackle
thing.
them.
Let them check it down. We'll rally up and tackle them, and it'll be 4th and 3. Well, maybe you don't want to play a defense now where you'll let them check it down to gain 6 yards on 3rd and 9. So now it changes the way you play defense.
Which means now you might get beat for 29 on 3rd and 9.
Maybe you have to play more man.
Right.
Maybe you have to use a spy if you're going to play more man because Hurts can beat you with his legs.
Right.
It changes everything about how you play specific down and distance situations.
That's going to be fun because that's another layer to this chess match because it used to be assumed, okay, get the ball back. Now we don't know. And those become.
And that's why none of this is, like I said, a mathematical equation.
Right.
There's so many variables here.
I like, and I'm curious if I'm phrasing this right, what we're seeing is a shifting in what are actually the high leverage plays in the game.
Correct.
Which I think is very cool. And now all of a sudden, if you can be the most dominant team in a situation where you need 3 yards, you have an advantage on the league.
Right.
If you can gain 3 yards when you have to gain 3 yards or stop 3 yards when you have to stop 3 yards, you're going to be
And by the way, it
advantage.
also changes offensive play calling because if you're 3rd and 7, you may run the ball now. Maybe the running game becomes more viable because you know what? So you gain 4, becomes 4th and 3.
Right.
I mean, it just changes a lot of things.
So there's a part of you, I think, that at this time of year you are loving the prospects and the draft and all of that, but then you also can't wait to see what are the scheme changes that are going to come to this league that affect that chess match.
What I really love is the fact that there's so many variables. I mean, I love the fact that, there's so many ways to do things. One of the first things I learned, and this goes back 25, 30 years ago when I really started, because I started getting the coaching tape in 1992, and I had to learn the game that way, is I remember coaches telling me there's so many different ways to do things. And I think you have to understand that. There's not one way to do things here.
Yeah.
And, you can win a lot of different ways. And you can win a lot of different ways each week. Sometimes what you do week 4 is not what you're going to do week 5 against the next opponent.
Quite frankly, that better be the case, right?
Right.
You better be changing it every week.
Right. I mean, you're not reinventing the wheel.
No, but the tailoring.
Yeah.
The tailoring.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of really find fascinating. Because to me, and I know coaches think this way, this, for coaches, it's an academic and intellectual experience. We know football's a physical game. We know on defense you want your guys to hit people and rally, and, we know all that. But the actual, how do you put together a defense? How do you structure your own concepts? How do you do it? That's all academic and intellectual.
Well, then you know as well as I do when they see something, they say, okay, we know they're going to do this.
Right.
When we show them this. So we're going to actually make this tweak.
Right.
And they see it pre-snap, and they start to get excited on the sideline, and then it ends up being a touchdown, and they knew it before the ball was snapped. That's what they live for.
The guy upstairs, because there's so many coaches upstairs who are watching specific things. Like, let's say it's offense. let's say after 2 drives, the guy upstairs tells the guy on the bench, whether it's the OC or whether it's a quarterback, whoever's down on the field, say, hey, Joe, we ran that motion 3 times. All 3 times, here's how the defense reacted. Now they work off that.
Yep.
They don't just call plays.
Of course.
Yeah.
Think about what Andy Reid dialed up in the Super Bowl they won over the Eagles, where they knew when they ran that half motion that it was going to get kicked and they were going to get it wide open.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is the real fun of football.
Oh, it's the best.
Yeah.
You're the best. This is the best.
I love these conversations are great.
The best.
And
Thank
that's
you so
what I hope
much.
people take away is that there's so many variables. It's this stuff's really hard. That's why coaches say it's hard to win on Sundays. It's really hard.
And the margins are smaller than ever.
Oh my God.
That's why it's the best.
Yeah.
You're the best. Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Always
it,
a
Nathan.
treat.
Thanks.
All right, the great Cosell.